Hello, hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Reese. I talk about books. Thank you so much for being here. It has been a minute, I feel like, since I made a video. I think it's been like maybe 3 weeks. I usually post a video every week, but in the month of August, I took a little break, which was nice. I did some summery things. I read some books, obviously. I DNF'd a few books. Yeah, we'll talk about it because this video is my August reading wrap-up. I think I DNF'd like 3 books this month, which is weird for me, odd, because usually I don't really DNF books. Maybe like 1, because usually I do enough research to kind of know, like, I'm gonna, Yeah, I'll chat a little bit about those, everything I read, how the videos normally work, I guess. To kick things off, let's look at my story graph stats. Okay, August. I read 4 books, 855 pages. Top moods, dark and tense. Yeah, we'll talk about why that is. You may know if you looked at the thumbnail of this. What else do we want to talk about? All fiction. I don't even remember the last time I read a nonfiction book. I'd like to change that. I think I'm about to crack open a nonfiction book, which will be kind of like I don't know, I'll be reading it periodically. I don't want to talk about it too much now because if I don't end up reading it, then that's going to be not exciting. All print. A DNF was a digital book, and we'll talk about that too. Yeah, I guess that's it. The first book that I read was American Psycho by Bret, Easton, Ellis. This is a satirical, dark story about a young Wall Street man, set in the 80s, late 80s. It was written in the late 80s, so it's like late 80s, early 90s, if that makes sense. You may be familiar with the book, the story, the movie that is based off the book. Maybe you're only familiar with the memes, the Patrick Bateman, Christian Bale memes. That is okay too. I want to keep this spoiler free, so I'm not gonna talk like a ton about what happens, just in case you haven't heard anything about it, but I will definitely talk about the vibes. So the main character, it's written in first person. Main character, Patrick Bateman, spends most of his days and is recounting all of those days. Let's see, going to the gym, eating expensive lunches, talking like so much about the brands of clothing that he and other people are wearing, being very image conscious, I guess working, but kind of not. And then he spends his nights going to clubs, generally talking about women and treating women badly. I mean, and talking about guys badly too, if we're gonna be real. And then let's just say doing a lot of other insane things. And also lots of cocaine at all times, day and night in this story. So does that sound appealing? I don't know. Why did I want to read this book? First of all, this is, I feel like, and I'm not being like, this shouldn't be surprising, I guess, but I feel like this is a classic, American classic book that like you kind of, everybody should read if you are like a certain type of person who likes to read and who wants to like have a bank of knowledge about the literary world, which is something that I strive to be and do. And I had never read anything by Bret Easton Ellis before, He is a contemporary of Donna Tartt. They are friends. They went to college together, which is kind of a fun fact. Very much like a Gen X person. When I was reading this, I was like, wow, this feels like Fight Club, but like Fight Club if you know that Fight Club is satire. Because I think there's a group of people. Anyways, we're not talking about Fight Club. Okay, I'm rambling. I'm already rambling. I don't even know how this video is gonna be long, sorry. Okay, first of all, reading this felt like what I imagine it's like to be on cocaine. Insane. Really long sentences, like crazy, like it's not just like what is happening in the story, but how the story is being told, and I loved that. Medium is the message and all that phrase, whatever, I think that is what that means. Also, we get unreliable narrator vibes, which I love personally, because aren't we all unreliable narrators? I enjoy unreliable narrators because it's like playing with the form of what a story is. You know, at least for me, that's what it feels like. And you know, I love me some books that do that. What else? I mentioned this book is wild. Yeah, I don't really do trigger warnings because I feel like every book probably has some version of that. But I would say like some parts of the story were really tough to read. I loved this book and I also hated this book, and I rated it a 4.5. Yeah, I think it was such a amazing execution of what it's trying to say. And yeah, themes. You probably guessed this a little bit, but we have over-consumerism, materialism, isolation, and identity, which is kind of interesting and cool. And I had seen the movie a while ago before I ever read the book, and I didn't quite catch what was happening about the identity stuff. And then in the book, it was so apparent, like he's constantly being mistaken for someone else. And yeah, I found that really interesting. Okay, other themes. Violence, fantasy as escapism. Last few thoughts on this. Yeah, 4.5. I would probably never reread this book again unless I had to reference a specific part and I wanted to like see what was happening, or I was reading it with someone else or as part of a like group or class, because yeah, intense with a capital I, but also impactful. What else? What else? Yeah, so I'll probably never read it again. But as I'm saying that, I'm like, would I ever be in a mood to read this again? I don't know. The next book I read, big vibe shift. Chess Story by Stefan Zweig. I hope I'm saying that right. This was a library book, and this had been on my TBR for a minute. On the surface, it is about men playing chess on an ocean liner, but it's also actually about trauma relating to war, psychological trauma, maybe a little bit about obsession. Yeah. A quick read. It's technically a novella, I believe. I really loved this. I found the writing and the translation really well done. I definitely want to read more by this author. This is one of those books, it was a library book, and it's definitely one that I would purchase to own for my shelves, to reread, to loan out to a friend. Yeah, would love to find a nice copy of this one day. What did I want to mention about this book? So there's a storytelling device that happens that I really enjoyed. It's like a nested story, kind of. We meet an unnamed passenger of this ocean liner who is the narrator, and then he recounts these stories of people that he is interacting with and meets and sees, these chess matches, and something about the way this is done was really compelling, and there's a sort of like humanity in it to me. I think it's because, again, it's like playing with form a bit, and really this is how, like, if you think about it, an author is telling us a story. That's what an author is doing when they're writing a story, even if the story is narrated by in first person by that character. And so to have this character then like physically tell us a story, like in Princess Bride, you know what I mean? I just think that's so cool. We're in that phase where I'm like interested in that kind of stuff. What else? Okay. And then a magical thing happened while I was reading this book. In addition to reading, I listen to a lot of podcasts. This is gonna take like 30 seconds, but it makes sense. Okay, I listen to a lot of podcasts, I watch a lot of movies. At the intersection of those two things are podcasts about movies, which basically, if I'm doing any sort of household chore, dishes, folding laundry, cleaning, I'm listening to a podcast, and it's usually a movie podcast. Okay, so now that you have that backstory, during the days that I was reading this book, I was scrolling through the back catalog of one of those movie podcasts that I love, and they had an episode about the Grand Budapest Hotel, a Wes Anderson film. And I thought, yeah, let's listen to it. So I put it on, and I've seen the movie many times. I'm listening, but you get into a flow state and you're kind of like half listening. And then all of a sudden, they start saying Stefan Zweig, like his name pops up, and I'm like, what is happening? And turns out the Grand Budapest Hotel is, I believe, dedicated to Stefan Zweig, and Wes Anderson was heavily influenced by a couple of his stories. Not this one, not Chess Story, but a few others of his. If you recall in the film, it's also kind of nested in that very quirky Wes Anderson kind of way, and there is an author who is kind of meant to be like a Stefan Zweig type character, and then the character Ray Fiennes plays, Gustav, is also supposed to be loosely based off of Zweig, and that was just so cool. It was like one of those kismet moments that made me so happy to be a person who likes books and movies. I don't know. It was cool. Now, I wouldn't describe Chess Story as like quite as whimsical as a Wes Anderson movie. Definitely not. But this is why I want to own a copy of Chess Story, because I finished the story, and then of course I watched the Grand Budapest Hotel, and I was like, I kind of want to read this again through this new lens of like, okay, just how these things connect. And definitely will be a reread for me one day. I think the two books of his that are closely influenced to him, I found a quote from Wes Anderson, and he mentions The Post Office Girl and Beware of Pity. So those two are going on my TBR, and I'll be checking those out. So anyways, Chess Story, it's a novella. It's a short one. If you are interested at all in like that sort of narrative device, or I would give it a shot. It was a breath of fresh air after American Psycho. Following that, I read Cursed Bread by Sophie Mackintosh. I picked this book up from the library because I was drawn to the cover that I saw at a bookshop earlier this summer, and I made a video about it where I was trying to guess what the book was based off of, or what the book was about based off of the cover. Yeah, this one, loosely based on a real historical event, post-World War II, a town in France that had a mass poisoning, unsolved. I believe they don't know actually what happened, but I'd say the book is much more of an intimate story between about a woman and a new couple that comes to this town, and her relationship with them, her friendship, her whatever you want to call it. So I gave this one a 3, and you know, my notes say a 3.5, but now that it's been a couple weeks and I don't really love half-star ratings, I guess it was a 3 for me. Yeah, that's not to say a 3 is bad. I think I just had higher hopes for this. The way I kind of think about it is like a 5 is a life-altering book. A 4 is a great book. A 3 is a good book. Yeah, like I will continue reading it. A 2 is like, there are some problems, and a 1 is just like, I'm DNFing a 1, you know? So yeah, a 3. Themes: obsession, desire, fantasy versus reality, post-war kind of trauma. This book reminded me of Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh, but more atmospheric, like floaty kind of weird versus gritty weird, which I think Eileen is more of, if that makes sense. It was a library book, and so I don't have it to flip through the reading, but some of the writing was beautiful to me. I enjoyed it. Especially, I think, okay, according to my notes, around like the 60-page mark, things started picking up. But there were alternating chapters and like time jumps, sort of, which I didn't love. Sometimes it works really well, but I find for me when it doesn't work well, I'm like, it takes me out of it. All this to say, I would give another book by her a shot. But I'm not necessarily jumping to read it as I would be with Ellis or Zweig. Now that I'm thinking about it, there's an interesting parallel between this book and American Psycho, in that they're kind of both like fever dream-esque, although this book is definitely more dreamlike and atmospheric, as I said, and American Psycho is like nightmare fuel. Next up, Elena Ferrante, The Days of Abandonment. August was my month to get back into Ferrante. I am reading all of her fiction books in the order they were published. I set out to do it in a year, but I'm not gonna like totally hold myself to that, because yeah, I don't want to stress myself out. But anyways, so this is book number 2. I guess I'm not going to talk too much about it because I am going to make a big video about this, and I want to reflect on it more within the context of all of her works. But I gave it 5 stars. Would I recommend this as somebody's first Ferrante? I'd have to ask you a couple questions first, and then I would say yes. It's good because it's short and it's not like, you know, a 4-book series. But yeah, anyways, I really loved it. It was great. One of my notes just reads, wow, wow, wow. So yeah, look out for more thoughts on this book when I finish reading them all, and then I make a video about it. Those were the books I finished. I did read a chunk of another book, but I haven't finished it yet at the time of filming this, and I'm gonna save it for next month because I don't have a fully formed opinion yet. Now that we're here at this part of the video, let's chat about the DNFs that I had this month. There were 3 of them. But first I want to say I definitely noticed a pattern for me, which is if I'm not into a book, I will like stretch out reading it forever. and I won't make the decision of DNFing it because sometimes I'm afraid that it's gonna get good, and also, or just like I'm not in the mood, but it is a good book that I should read. But yeah, I'm trying to strike a balance between giving things a chance, but also recognizing that life is too short and there are way too many good books to read. So, you know, but also like not every book can be a 4 or a 5 star or even a 3 star. And part of the reason why I read is to become a better writer. And if I only read books that are amazing and excite me, does that mean I'm missing out on learning something from other books that are maybe more challenging to me, like one of these that I'll talk about? Or, you know, I don't know. Things I think about. But also, there are too many good books, so I'm not going to beat myself up about it. Let's talk about those DNFs. First was the Doloriad by Missouri Williams. I think I held on to this one the most. What do my notes say? Just dense, underlined. Honestly, the cover is like 20% of why I wanted to read this book. I think it's awesome. Also, the post-apocalyptic premise of this book. It was a nebulous setting. It had all the elements of a book that I would like, but as I said, very dense. The sentences were just too long for me, and in that nebulous setting, it just, it wasn't the vibe that I needed or wanted in the moment. I also felt like it switched perspectives, and that threw me off. Like, the long sentences, the switching perspectives, I couldn't get into it, but I tried. I really did. I read 40 pages. All right, next book I DNF'd was Model Home by Rivers Solomon. The premise of the story: a haunted house novel turned on its head with familial secret histories and the search for healing in contemporary American life. Sounds kind of good. Sounds kind of spooky, but also having like depth to it, which is interesting, and I'm gonna be drawn to. This one I only got 15 pages into it, and I just sadly couldn't. It just wasn't for me. This one was definitely less nebulous than the Doloriad, but it still wasn't really straightforward. Right out of the gate, there were a lot of like mother and God analogies and religious analogies that felt like too heavy-handed for me. So that kind of just turned me off. And then the last book that I DNF'd was less about the writing style or, you know, things like that, and more about just the form that I was reading the book in. That book was Birds of America by Lorrie Moore, a collection of short stories. I set out to read another book by her, but my library only had this available, and so I picked it up, but it was digital, and I read it on my Kindle. I read, I think, 1 or 2 stories, and then I just put down my Kindle, and I never picked it up again. Less about the quality of the writing, and more about just, I don't like reading things I don't like reading things digitally unless it's like a NetGalley or something. If it's not a physical book, I'm probably not going to pick it up. So this is me realizing something about myself, and yeah, you learn something. If this book were to come through as a physical copy, which I actually don't think my library had, and that's why I picked up the digital version, I would pick it up. Yeah, so that was my August in reading. This was good. This was a nice chat. I love reflecting about what I read. I feel like I just barrel through life sometimes, and actually taking a moment to reflect on things that have an impact on me is kind of a good practice. I should probably do this more with other things in my life. Anyways, August definitely got me back into a Ferrante kind of mood. The next book of hers is The Lost Daughter, which I have read before, but I'm excited to reread it now, having read, you know, her earlier books with that context. Also, there's a movie version of it, which is gonna be interesting to watch. I may switch from 4 videos a month, because I have been just uploading weekly, to 2 videos a month. That will give me more time to read and think of thoughtful content that I want to talk about. We're gonna see how that goes. Hopefully it doesn't totally like bomb my channel, though. If it does, it's fine, you know? I'll still be here talking about what I'm reading, and looking forward to hearing what you are reading. Looking forward to adding some of those books to my TBR, because that's what I love to do when everyone comments about good books they're reading. So yes, I hope you had a wonderful August. I hope your September is starting off well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!